In today's video, we're going to be covering the death of a spouse and specifically how ownership is transferred in Texas and how ownership is looked at by the state of Texas when it comes to transferring properties to the remaining spouse, the living spouse in that relationship. So we'll be answering a lot of the common questions that we get here in real estate. Now, fortunately in Texas tends to favor spouses quite favorably, and it makes it a little bit more amiable and easier to work with. My name is Aaron White. I'm a realtor with the A-List team. I have been investing and I've been a realtor in real estate for quite a long time. For over 10 years, I've been helping people buy or sell homes and working with real estate. We've seen a number of situations throughout that time, and that's why we're here to help today and answer a few questions that we commonly get with our clients. Now, every state has different ways of looking at ownership of real estate or ownership of property. In Texas, we have what's called community property. Basically, when you are married and you purchase a piece of property, it doesn't actually matter if both spouses' names are on that property or not. That property is owned at a 50-50 split. So for example, we have a house that we live in today, my wife and I live in today, and both of our names are on that. That house is 50-50. I bought a rental property just in my name because it simplifies the process of signing papers and all those other things. But still, because we bought that house and we were married when we bought that house is also split 50-50. My wife's name does not need to be on that property for that to be considered community property. The second type of ownership is called separate property. And in this case, the property in Texas, at least, has to have been before the marriage. So for example, if your spouse bought a piece of property before the marriage and came into the marriage with that property, then it would be considered separate property. And unless the spouse's name is added after their marriage to that property, it's not technically the ownership of that spouse. It would go through either the will that was established beforehand or the standard breakdown of property in the state of Texas. Another example of separate property in Texas would be if a spouse who has been deceased inherited a piece of property and they had not sold that property yet before they were deceased. In that case, it would be considered separate property and not community property, as it was inherited property, even though they inherited that property after they were married. Now, another thing to look at in Texas is the language on the deed. If it's a joint tenancy with right of survivorship, then the property would actually automatically transfer to full ownership of the living spouse. And you don't need to go through probate, you don't need to go through an affidavit process. It is fully 100% of that spouse's ownership. Now, this is something you need to do beforehand and plan. That's not the default in Texas. The default in Texas is tenancy in common. With tenancy in common, that house is owned 50-50. So for example, if Mary marries John, both of them own 50% of that home. And when John were to pass, as an example, Mary would either need to go through the probate process or the affidavit of heirship process to inherit that other half and then continue to sell that property. And essentially, there's a full video, which we'll include the link in the description below, that goes into more detail on probate versus affidavit of heirship. But essentially, probate is a judicial process by which either a will is read and the property is distributed according to the wishes within that will. It always has to go through probate. Affidavit of heirship is when there is no will and there's no conflict by the remaining heirs, and they go through the process of dividing that property equally according to the laws in Texas. That gets a little bit different as you introduce children or previous marriages, and that's what the affidavit of heirship is for, is to help guide you in those different scenarios that may occur as to who gets what inheritance of what property. As I mentioned before, my name is Aaron White. I'm a realtor with the A-List team. We have helped a number of people through this process before. If we can help you, certainly reach out to us on our website or give us a call. If we're not the right person, we're gonna get you with the right attorney or the right title company to ultimately answer the questions that you need in order to help you through this next chapter and move on in the process of selling your home. We'll see you at the closing table.